The schedule for the NBA Cup is out, and Miami faces a tough challenge if they want to win it all. We break down their chances and some ways they might improve the in-season tournament on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg. I'm editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat Media members, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. The sports aren't sportsing like they want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Before we get to how we'll fix the in-season tournament and which role players on the Heat we're most excited to watch next season, the NBA on Tuesday announced the groups for the NBA Cup, which used to be called the in-season tournament, but nobody really cares. The Heat are in a group with the Bucks, Pacers, Raptors, and Pistons. The groups are based off of win-loss records from last season. This is evidently what they came up with. The Heat were in the same group as the Bucks last year. The Bucks, of course, made it all the way to the semifinals. I say, of course, like anybody remembers. And it was the Bucks and the Knicks who were also in Miami's group last year. So we'll talk a minute about how it is Miami can advance past the group stage, unlike what happened last year. But David, now that we have the release here, how excited are you for the return of the NBA Cup? Did you think it was successful last year? Do you even remember who won?
Yeah, the Lakers did. I think they got a banner out of it, so absolutely. And they beat the Pacers, who
they
are
didn't
now
hang the
in
banner.
Miami's group.
They did not.
You didn't hang the banner? I think they did, didn't they?
I thought they decided that they were not going to do it.
Okay,
but I could be wrong on that.
Right. I know you're right. Absolutely.
You
know what? Regardless, we talked about this. Like maybe it's just a matter of the collective.
No, you're right. They did. They did put the banner up. I remember this. The NBA basically forced them to hang the banner.
It might be collective short-term memory loss from as a society, now with the advancement of technology being the way it is. And I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a second. I know that's an even older expression that people don't even understand, but that's neither here nor there. Like we kind of
were playing basketball in peach baskets is when people are using soapboxes.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. They would just get in the middle of the street and get on soapboxes. And that's how you block shots back then. Anyway,
the plumbers block shots.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Bob Cousy wouldn't have gone and shot in so much if it wasn't for the damn soapbox. In any case, look, you know what? We hated the idea of the tournament. It was not hated. Maybe that's too strong a word. Like nobody gave a damn. It felt like it was being forced. It was like, oh, what's going on with these gaudy courts? They were going all in and the marketing for it. It just felt so excessive. And guess what? Even a crusty old bastard like yourself, you felt by the end of the tournament, you were like, you know what? It actually worked. So I'm going to keep you in check here a little bit and not allow that short-term memory to kind of take over, because the in-season tournament, or whatever you want to call it, the Emirates NBA Cup, it was actually fun. By the end of it, we were both interested in seeing how it all played out. There was some intrigue in those mid-season games that generally don't mean anything, that felt like the stakes were just a little bit higher. And sometimes that's all you need. Maybe that's just a byproduct, again, of the Heat being the Heat and not really caring much about the regular season. But we felt something. We appreciated those in-season games when they actually had higher stakes, and I think people will too.
So I appreciate you keeping me in check here and fact-checking me so I can't do the swerve that I wanted to do. But I don't recall any of those emotions that you were mentioning that I had. I'm sure there's record of it on a podcast somewhere back then, but
probably not.
I don't care about the NBA Cup or the in-season tournament. I don't care that it has a new name and a new sponsor. I still am struggling to figure out why it matters, but more than that, it less than me. And we'll get to this here later on, but it just feels like the casual fan still has no reason to care, or even worse, no reason to go out of their way to understand it. And that's the part that I want to put a pin in, because we will get to some ways that the NBA can fix that. And I am a little surprised that the NBA basically made no changes to the in-season tournament. We kind of heard that after the first year, they might consider some changes. They're basically like, well, our big change was getting a sponsorship attached to it. So that was the big complaint, right? That it wasn't sponsored. That's what everybody's problem with the in-season tournament was.
Right.
So whatever. So here's the point. Before we get to all that stuff, the Heat are in the in-season tournament, the NBA Cup. I'm sorry. I'm going to keep mixing them up. You know what? I'm not sorry. Whatever. You call it two different things in 2 different years. That's what happens. They're with the Bucks, the Pacers, the Raptors, and the Pistons. That is a pretty tough group. And the Heat failed to advance past the group play part last year. The Bucks and the Knicks advanced through it. But both teams, so all three, the Bucks, the Knicks, and the Heat finished group play with a 4-2 record. If I got that right, or 4-1 record, or whatever it was. But the Heat ended up losing the tiebreaker because the tiebreaker was based on points. And the Heat were, I had just looked this up. I'm sorry?
The Heat don't score.
Right, the Heat don't score, and when they do score, they don't win by a lot. So it was based off of overall point differential in group play. So the Heat's point differential was 4 points. They had won their games in group play by a total of 4 points. Milwaukee won theirs by 46 points, and New York won theirs by 42 points, which makes a lot more sense for a team winning group stage play. So the Heat, even though they had the same record as Milwaukee and New York, and again, you can fact check on me. Maybe I'm not. But it was part of the tiebreaker with at least the Knicks, and why it is that they didn't make why they didn't advance to the knockout stage, and then the knockout stage happened, and then the semifinal and the championship game are both held in Las Vegas. So
that's still the case. That's still going to happen this year as well.
As far as I know, yeah, it's still going to be in Vegas, and as far as I know, even though there's some talk about maybe changing how the tiebreakers are done, that's still the tiebreaker. But again, we're getting information on this over the, maybe that's something that'll change. But what do you think? I mean, in terms of the group play, I think it's basically the same as it was last year in degree of difficulty. Milwaukee, I think, is going to be better this season. You get a full training camp with Damian Lillard. Doc Rivers is back. I like the little roster additions, as small as they are. I think they're better than they were last year. The Pacers are awesome. They made it all the way to the final last season. They're a team that kind of feels tailor-made to succeed in this NBA Cup format. The Raptors, depending on how you feel about them, maybe they're a 500-ish team. I don't think that they're a walkover. The Pistons certainly are. But overall, I think it's a pretty tough group.
I agree. I think all those teams improved, to be honest. I think the Bucks are going to be better. The Pacers are going to be better. I think even the Pistons are now they've got, new coach, new direction. I mean, the roster doesn't seem dramatically better than it was last year, but players make small incremental growth over the course of the offseason, and
Cunningham got better towards the end of last year.
Yeah, I could see Cade Cunningham if he's healthy. I have high expectations for him. So
the Pistons almost beat the Heat last season in the third game of the season, wasn't it? So
that's right.
It's not like the Heat can overlook the Pistons as bad as they.
No. I think it kind of all speaks to, we were talking about the preseason yesterday. Every game matters, even when realistically it doesn't. You cannot look at these in-season tournament games or NBA Cup games, whatever you're calling them, and just kind of overlook them. Every game has to be taken seriously. And that kind of speaks to the mental focus of this group moving forward with the season. Are they going to be interested in making the most of these 82 opportunities to build on their playoff hopes? Or are they just looking at it as, well, we can flip the switch when we have to? And I don't know. And I don't think we'll get a clear understanding of that until we see a handful of games being played and whether or not this team can stay healthy. And of course, that's another factor. As always.
And to your point from last year also, I mean, this team felt relieved when they didn't, right? We talked about this. They were relieved when they did not advance past group play and that this in-season tournament thing was over and that they didn't have to go to Las Vegas. Exactly. They seemed legitimately relieved. And for a team that is the grittiest, dirtiest, knee-pattiest team in the league, boy, they skipping games, don't they? And so I just thought it was a little, anti-Miami Heat. For the team that puts winning above all else, they really didn't care about winning this thing. It's fake and ridiculous as it is. And like I said at the top, I still don't get it. And I don't know why anybody should care. But the team that is supposed to care about winning when nobody else does also didn't care. So to your point, does that flip this season? I do want to rank the Miami Heat's group stage group against some of the other ones in the East. We'll reveal who is the group of death in the group stage in the NBA. We'll also have our ways to fix the NBA Cup. All of that and more coming up later on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Look, we all love sports. We all love them so much. We're listening to this podcast. We never want them to stop. But the playoffs, well, they're over. We got fewer games now on TV. WNBA is still keeping hopes alive. Baseball, of course, but that's pretty much it. The sports, they're just not sportsing the way you want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. And all you've got to do is open the app, and you can dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers, new ones, old ones, anybody in between, with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So where does the Heat's group stack up? They're technically in Group B, David. Yep. I think they were in Group B last year also, for those keeping track. Whatever it matters. Again, who cares?
It's going to become, at somewhere down the line, there's going to be an NBA Cup historian. He's going to have all these facts, he or she, I should say. They are going to have.
You know what? I'm going to carve that out for the NBA Cup historian who does not care about the NBA Cup.
Yeah, tattoo of the Emirates logo. It's like, yeah, man, NBA Cup all the way. It's NBA Cup season,
I'm honestly
baby.
surprised they haven't gotten sponsorships for the groups. Instead of being East Group B, it should be East Group FanDuel. It should be the FanDuel group of the East, you know? It should be something like that. The eBay Motors group,
ideas.
You know?
Yeah, don't give them any ideas.
It's complicated even more. So I actually think the Heat have a claim to being in the toughest group in the East, unfortunately, here. It's going to be tough. Only maybe Group A compares. So that Group A is the Knicks, the Magic, the Sixers, the Nets, and the Hornets. Maybe Group A gets a slight edge over Group B, but to me, those are clearly the two toughest of the three groups in the East. It really kind of comes down to, all right, well, you got the Bucks, Pacers, and Heat, and then you got the Knicks, Magic, and Sixers. Like,
I think Knicks and Sixers are viewed as two title contenders.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
So that's two title contenders in one group. Almost automatically gives them the Pacers are a good playoff team. I don't know that they're title contenders yet. The Heat, who knows? Good point. Probably not viewed as title contenders.
Miami and Orlando kind of right there on the same tier. Indiana kind of a tier in between them. Toronto and Brooklyn, or Toronto, like Brooklyn and Detroit are going to be bad on purpose. Toronto and Charlotte are pretty comparable. Kind of maybe it's just eye of the beholder type deal there. But those are the tough groups. The easiest group, though, by far, is Group C, which is the Washington Wizards, Atlanta Hawks, Chicago Bulls, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Boston Celtics. So the Celtics, again, getting the cakewalk here. Nothing new for Boston.
I mean, the Cavaliers.
Is Jaylen Brown going to complain when he doesn't get in-season Cup MVP?
That is a sensitive group right there. Locked On NBA, I talked about, the Celtics continuing to whine after the whole gold medal. Team USA, and it was, like Celtics fans are like, no, we didn't whine. It's like, you're whining about not whining. It's hilarious. It's amazing.
All right, here's the group of death, though. It's not in the Eastern Conference. It's in the Western Conference, and I just want to point it out because I teased it. But West Group C, man, Denver, Dallas, New Orleans, Golden State, and Memphis. Like, whatever team got Memphis drawn was going to get screwed because the Grizzlies just had a gap year, John Morant, the whole thing. But they're going to be awesome. I would argue and maybe even put money on FanDuel that of those five teams in that group, the Grizzlies end up with the best record at the end of the regular season. Denver, Dallas, New Orleans, Golden State, Memphis. And I would argue maybe Golden State has the fewest wins, probably them or New Orleans. That's a tough group. There is not a Detroit Pistons in that group, right? There's no Washington Wizards in that
playoff
group.
Teams.
Yeah,
five playoff teams.
Yeah, all five of those teams could be in the playoffs. Great point. So that's a tough group. All right. Speaking of the NBA Cup, how can we fix it? I've been making the jokes. I still don't fully understand why fans care, but again, to me, the biggest problem with the NBA Cup isn't the painted courts. It's not the fact that you don't even win anything of substance other than a banner that the NBA forces you to hang up. But it's the fact that it is, and you get some money. The players get some money. Mm-hmm. I still don't see that, like, fans. There's no reason for the fans to care about players getting money. But to me, the biggest problem is that it's so confusing that I actually think it does the opposite of what it's intended to do. I think it actually pushes casual fans away from the sport during the time that it's airing, because it's like, wait, so the court's painted on Tuesdays and Fridays, and it matters for what? And then they're going to Vegas when? And wait, does it, like, these games count for the standings, but the other ones don't count for the standings? To me, it just does the opposite. I think when you start layering on levels of confusion onto something, it doesn't entice a casual fan who wasn't paying all that much attention in the first place to start learning more about the subject. You know what I mean? And so yeah, I think it kind of has. Every time I've ran across like a casual fan and who's asked me about the in-season tournament over the last year or when it was happening, it was always like met with like frustration and annoyance and like an eye roll. And I can't imagine that that's what the NBA had in mind.
Yeah, you're probably talking to your wife about it, and she doesn't know what's going on. Like, I mean, she's just feeding off of you and your frustration. You know, it's like that's what it is.
Okay, I have other friends in my life other than my wife. I talk to other people
that are bringing up the in-season tournament. I sincerely doubt it. It's like, what's up with this court? What's up with this court? You know, and that's the whole thing too. It's like it is. Look, again, I'm gonna continue to bang the drum on this because I feel like last year we were on the same boat talking about what is this all about. It just feels forced. But towards the end, there was genuine excitement about it. On the last night of the tournament, there were games with stakes that felt exciting, and the courts kind of just, I think, highlighted that. You know, it was like it underscored it more than anything else. Like, you know what? Oh, these are the games that matter. And yeah, I mean, I understand that courts were used.
No, I think that was a decent idea. You got to figure out some sort of visual concept to separate the games that were part of the in-season tournament versus the ones that weren't. I have no problem with that, and I do agree with you. Like, that last night was kind of cool. I just wonder if it was cool for us, people who are watching this in November and December anyway, and not necessarily cool for the fans that this NBA thing is. The NBA Cup is basically intended to attract, which is the fans that aren't interested in November and December anyway. That said,
I get that. I get that.
I think that part of it is good. I think the idea is good. I'm here for an NBA Cup. I'm totally down for the soccer style, like something else other than the Larry O'Brien Trophy. Like, I'm down for it. I just think it needs some fixing. I think it needs some help to get it across the point of where a casual fan cares about it. And so I have some ideas. Number one, I think the timing is wrong. So right now, the NBA Cup is going from November 12th to December 3rd. And the schedule for the NBA Cup, group stage, the knockout rounds are embedded within the regular season schedule. So that's the part that I think is a little confusing. But I think that just the timing overall, it's too early. It's too early in the schedule. I feel like the NBA season is fresh enough that we don't need this other thing, right? I'm still interested to see like how the new additions are playing, the new coaches, everything new. It's still new enough where I don't need this other thing on top of it. So I would argue push it back a little bit later, or just do it to have it start the season. But go one or the other. It just sort of feels like it's in this weird in-between part of the schedule that doesn't really make sense. So yeah.
I think it's in the right place. Like, I get what you're saying, but I think the reality is also there's always the players that are either injured during the preseason or even maybe injured during the offseason, and then they're hoping they can work their way back. By November-ish, when these in-season tournament games are taking place, they're usually working their way towards health. They'll still be able to participate in some of these tournament games. If you hold it too close to the All-Star break, come on, you know what that's like. Everybody's checked out. Everybody's already got plans to either go to San Francisco
or
Cancun, you know?
I think that's the reason to have it then, is to make sure that they don't check out. It's like, hey,
but you're not going to force players to do it.
Well, that's what the money's for. You already mentioned the money before. You're not it's like, hey, you're going to check out, or here's like $1 million to not.
You're not going to force the superstar players to care because they're already getting paid. They don't need about it. It's for
that kind of gets down to the argument about whether or not it matters or the money matters or not.
It's for the two-way players. You know, those guys. They're the ones that are going to play their hearts out.
Not too late, but what if it was just January 1st, right? You get your Christmas Day showcase, which is sort of the unofficial Well, all of this stuff falls into the football season already. That's kind of the NBA's problem. But to me, Christmas Day is sort of the unofficial start for of watching basketball for a lot of casual fans. So if you put this thing right kind of after that, I think it would engage that fan base a little bit more. You would be running into college football bowl game season a little bit, but there's ways to figure that out around the schedule where it's not going to matter. And then I say, just do it. What's stop? Like, if you're already embedding the group stage play within the schedule, it's not like a rest or scheduling conflict. Just do all the games. Have it last 2.5 weeks. Don't mix them up in the schedule. Just do it, you know? Like, that's the part I still haven't really fully figured out. So I think if you start it January 1st, have it go like 2.5, 3 weeks, and then that's it. And then it's over. And we're like, okay, that was kind of cool. And then you have like a 2-week lead up, 2 or 3 week lead up to the All-Star break, the trade deadline, and all that stuff. It just feels like it would be more propulsive after Christmas Day, and it would kind of keep people engaged through what tend to be the doggiest of the dog days of the year, which is kind of January to February-ish.
Are they? I don't know, because then you get the, like, everybody's looking forward to the trade deadline. Everybody's kind of got their sphincters tightened because they're not sure exactly what's going to happen as the trade deadline approaches, and you get this kind of collective, nervousness that's palatable. It's like you can't enjoy the in-season tournament because you've got the dread of the trade deadline.
It's like, hey, look over here. You're not getting traded anytime soon. And then, boom, you get traded. I don't know.
Go to Vegas. One last trip to Vegas with your old team before you get moved. Yeah.
My one other idea is that the winner, I think there should be something that fans care about. This wouldn't come into play probably most seasons, but I think if you either win the NBA Cup or if you're just in the final, I think that should be like the ultimate tiebreaker in the standings. So if you have the same record as another team at the end of the regular season, before it comes down to home record, away record, in conference record, all these things, like if you won it, again, it wouldn't impact every single season, but it would every once in a while. Like if you won the NBA Cup, you just get that ultimate tiebreaker. It's like the ultimate trump card over everything if you end up having the same record or same win percentage as another team in your conference. I
think the league just thinks, we want them to care about.
I think you're right.
Rather than, it's just.
I think we just want you to care about it without all the other stuff, right? I think you're right, but and then my last thing is to avoid that. So the situation Miami was in last year. So it was one of Milwaukee or New York ended up having some sort of blowout win. I think it was the Knicks during their group stage play, and that's so heavily weighted their point differential in group play that the Heat by the last night didn't have a chance. I remember trying to do the math of like, well, if the Knicks lose by 30 and the Heat win by 15, then they got a chance to make the knockout stage. But to avoid that, I think all group play games should be played with the Elam ending.
Oh,
which I love. I love an Elam ending because then you're just basically putting a target score on top of it. There would still be the possibility of blowouts and stuff, but it would be minimized. Because you just wouldn't have garbage time. And so I kind of like that idea. And I just like the idea of showing more Elam ending games. And that would also be sort of a differentiator for fans. It'd be like, oh, these games are a little bit different. You're all for it. You're a fan of the Elam ending too. So
yeah, I love that. I think, again, anything that makes these stand out, it's like you just give it a little taste. And who knows? It might be like the 3-point shot. It was like at first it's like, oh, this is weird and different. But guess what? Eventually it'll take off and wind up redefining the NBA. So who knows? Maybe if you start letting in slowly but surely, enough people will kind of understand that this is a fun, different way of doing things. So yeah, I like it.
Coming up, which non-Heat starter are we looking forward to seeing the most next season? That's next on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. We're going to introduce something new here. Who knows if we're going to keep doing it? That's a mystery. We're going to call it the Daily Question. It's exactly what it sounds like. One of us is going to come up with a question to ask the other one, and then we're going to talk about it. David, what was your question for today?
Which non-starter, and again, the starting line is still very much for debate, but we kind of think there's at least 5-6 names that seem much more likely to be started. But which non-starting role player on this team are you most interested in seeing, and why?
So why did you ask this question? Did you have a name in mind before you kind of pitched it?
I've got my own kind of name that I'm curious about. But just there's so much debating and angst even amongst like Heat fans. Like, oh, what? Who's going to start? Tyler, bench him, trade him, cut him. I don't care. Just get him off the team. All this really loud noise attacking some of these key players. Who knows what's going to happen with Terry Rozier? But I think it's pretty clear they're going to be starters, or at least they're starter quality. And that being the case, like, we don't have any say, like, not as media, but as fans, we don't have that kind of input. These guys are on this team, and whatever your personal feelings may be about them, it's kind of moot. And I think they've proven in Tyler's case. Let's use him as an example because I think he seems to be the most polarizing name. No matter what your personal feelings are about him, or whether or not he hasn't turned a corner, or how you view him, or how that's changed over the last few years. And again, I'll remind everybody, 2 seasons ago, there was nobody that excited the crowd at American Airlines Arena, or whatever it was called briefly, Miami-Dade County Arena, whatever it was. Nobody excited the fans there more than Tyler Hero. Like, every time he had the ball in his hands was like a collective holding of your breath, waiting for him to do something. And now 2 years later, it's the pitchforks and everything else. So, kind of tying back to what I said in the first segment about the collective short-term memory of our society. But I think those guys are going to start. Jimmy, Bam. Again, I think Nico's probably going to start. I don't think Khalil Ware is going to start, and I think you've made that point yourself. I think it's going to be Tyler, and it's probably going to be Terry, and that's your 5-man starting lineup, because that's what we saw last year at the end of last year when everybody was finally healthy. It could change, but let's just say those are the names that are those are the 5 players that are likely to get the most minutes on this roster. So everybody else on this roster, to me, it's fair game to answer this question.
Okay. My answer is Jaime Jaquez Jr. then.
Damn it, that's my answer.
Well, we're on the same page now. It's not bad. So I'm not going to rule out the possibility that he starts. I do agree with you that if I was projecting a starting lineup, that the 5 you laid out would be the 5 I would go with, and so that means that Jaime is coming off the bench. There's also some overlap skill-wise with what he does and Jimmy Butler does, and the fact that he shot 32% from 3 last year, and that basically if you're on the court with Jimmy and Bam at the same time, you have to stretch the floor. And Jaime could obviously come into training camp and preseason and shoot 40% from 3 and maybe work his way into the starting mix. But for now, I think he's projected as a guy who's coming off the bench. And I think you could also say that he's probably one of Miami's best 5 players.
Ooh.
Yeah. I feel pretty good about that. Yeah, I've got Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, Terry, and Jaime. Not necessarily in that order, but maybe in that order. I don't know.
Is Jaime better than Nico?
Yeah. Jaime Jaquez is better than Nikola Jovic right now.
Is Jaime better than Duncan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just think he does more on the court, right? Like when you talk about people who are making decisions with the ball in their hands and could be a playmaker and be an advantage creator on offense in a way that Nikola Jovic and Duncan Robinson just aren't right now. I think that's such an underrated skill. The fact that he just could create his own shot for himself and for others, basically. So that's the guy who also I'm so interested to see what his leap is going to be.
Yes,
right? Because there is a big I know we're like, oh, like you should never, like, who cares if he was in college for 4 years? Look what he was as a rookie. Like, we should start looking at 4-year players more heavily. The one thing against the 4-year player is that the ceiling tends to be lower and capped, right? Whatever leap that Jaime Jaquez, like, you can't just attribute, in other words, a 2nd or 3rd year leap to Jaime Jaquez Jr. the same way that you would attribute that leap to somebody who entered the league at 19 or 20 years old, because you could argue that Jaime Jaquez already made that leap, right? And I certainly think you could, considering that he was a 3-star recruit going to UCLA and then became a first-round pick. You could quite legitimately make an argument that, oh, he made the leap, it just happened in college, and that's why he's a first-round pick right now. So what more is there going to be to his game? At the same time, you and I watch Jaime Jaquez Jr. very closely, and I think you and I both believe that there's a ceiling to hit with Jaime and that he has been overlooked for a lot of different reasons throughout his basketball life. But I'm just interested to see if and when and how that leap looks when it happens, because if he can become the kind of player that I think we expect him to be, and when he becomes that kind of player, that changes a lot of the Miami Heat's thinking and their calculus. And when I'm watching him next year, I'm just going to think like, okay, is this the guy who's going to be a partner with Jimmy or with Bam Adebayo if and when Jimmy Butler eventually leaves, like, what does this look like? What is this, the next era of Miami Heat basketball that feels like it's slowly been ushered in here?
Yeah, all great points. I'm not as optimistic, but that's why he's my player to watch, and because I think it's because of the reasons you said. It's that ceiling is still higher. He hasn't reached it, but he's already taken that leap that young players often do, where they kind of just get their head out of their where, and they figure it out. And I think that's what he did. He did that in college. He understood what was required of him, and he took that leap. To make that leap as a pro is much more difficult to do. I think it's much more incremental. And you can look at Jimmy Butler, like the fact that he went from a guy who had to excel in one particular area defensively, and he didn't become a star level scorer, go-to player until much later in his career. And I think we could start to see some of that progress. He's going to make progress. I should qualify that. I think Jaime is going to make progress. I just think it's going to be 5% rather than 25%, which is what a lot of people think from your rookie to your sophomore year. You're going to take this huge, incredible leap. Yeah, that happens when you're 19, and all of a sudden when you go to 2021 and you start filling out, and you start getting NBA conditioning and NBA, Jaime is already a grown man. He is 23. Like, can he continue to tone his body? Can he continue to excel? Can he continue to grow? Absolutely. But those things are going to take more and more time because he's just an older player. He's not coming straight out of high school or 1 year removed from high school. So I think there's going to be opportunity. I want to see the shot get more consistent. I want to see the understanding defensively of what he needs to do kind of take another level. But even if that's just a small incremental growth, I'd be happy with that, because I think it's going to be an indicator of the foundation continuing to expand and strengthen so that he can build a much more long-term productive career, which I think he will have. I think he's going to be a really good NBA player for at least 12 seasons, which is saying something. Like, that's all you can hope for, especially out of a late mid-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, again, when we start comparing Jaime Jaquez to other players, I'm not really sure. Obviously, when he's a rookie, you compare him to other rookies, right? Because they're all involved in the all-rookie team and rookie of the year and things like that. But now you don't compare him to rookies. Now you compare him to people his age. Right. And that's a very different player. For example, players who are 23 years old, the same age as Jaime Jaquez Jr., Tyrese Maxey, Zion Williamson, Devin Vassell, Jalen Williams from the Oklahoma City Thunder, Evan Mobley on Cleveland, right? Like Jalen Suggs for the Orlando Magic, Jaden McDaniels on Minnesota. These are his peers now. These are his peers, right? Not Brandon Miller, not Brandon Podziemski. Like, those are not his peers. Those guys are significantly younger than Jaime Jaquez Jr. That's Jaime's peer group now, right? Because, like, 7 years from now, when they're 30 years old, all these guys are going to be 30 years old. Those are the kind of players that he's going to, be obviously the same age, and those will be the guys that he gets compared to. So now Jaime on that group is, I'm looking at points per game from last year. He's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th. He is 10th in points per game. You and I know that everything doesn't come down to points per game, but it's a good barometer. He's 10th in points per game among 23-year-olds in the NBA, which is still very good. So he's one of the best 10 best 23-year-olds in the league. But now that's who you compare him against, not the guys he was drafted with last summer. All right. Yeah. That'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. We'll be back with another episode. We're going to take one day off on Wednesday. We'll be back on Thursday with our next episode. Thanks for listening.